In this video I am going to look at a game I played last Tuesday in the 9th round of this year's Horsham Club Championship. I had the white pieces and was up against Phil Stimpson. I started with e4 and my opponent defended with c5, the Sicilian defence. Play went knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Rossolimo variation. g6. This is black's most common defence. It is the natural way to develop enclosed lines of the Sicilian. Now, white has various ways to play this position. One is bishop takes c6, leading to positions where white has the superior structure but black has the bishop pair. However, instead of that I chose castles, the most flexible move, and after bishop g7, white again has several options. He could once more take on c6, he could play the rook to e1, or he could play, what I played in the game, c3, preparing d4. Black played knight f6, hitting the e-pawn, and now white once more has a choice. He could play e5, when the black knight would come to d5, or he could play what I played in the game, which is rook e1, maintaining the integrity, or at least potential integrity, of white's centre. White would like to play d4 here with a nice pair of pawns on d4 and e4. Black played a6, putting the question to the bishop on b5. White naturally has several options. He could take on c6, he could retreat to a4, or he could put the bishop back on f1. So for instance, bishop takes c6, d takes c6, intending bishop g4, h3. And this is definitely possible for white. But instead of this, I just went for bishop f1. One of the points of rook e1 is that it leaves this square open for the white bishop. And after d6, intending bishop g4, I played h3, preventing bishop g4. Black now played e5, looking to seize space in the centre. He would like in due course to play d5 when he would dominate the position. Now here I really should have played d4, which is the most natural follow-up to h3, contesting the centre, and here I think the position would have been slightly preferable for white. It's a little reminiscent of a number of lines of the Rilo-Pez. But instead of that, I played the rather passive knight a3. And after castles, the position started to turn very much in black's favour. He's now looking to build towards playing d5, seizing the centre, and white struggles to complete his development while opposing this. d3. White intends bishop g5. h6. Black prevents bishop g5. Bishop e3. White delays d5 by putting pressure on c5 and prepares to hit h6 with queen d2. Rook e8. Black covers e5 to prepare d5, although he will need to play b6 first to cover c5. Queen d2. White hits h6. King h7. Black defends h6. Rook on a to d1. White brings his other rook to the centre, but his pieces are still not well coordinated. He would like to play d4, but this will require more than a few moves to prepare. Meanwhile, black is close to achieving d5. b6. Black covers c5 so as to prepare d5. Queen c1. This creates a visually awkward opposition of white rook and black queen, but it is just a bluff. Now, d5 immediately is good. but black instead played queen c7, allowing himself to be bluffed. But this isn't necessary, and also the queen is not well placed here. Now white missed an opportunity to create counterplay here and maintain equal chances, and that opportunity would involve exploiting the position of the queen on c7. b4. Now if c takes b4, c takes b4, knight takes b4 is obviously not possible because a queen takes c7. So black would have to choose between b5, d4, queen b7, d5, knight e7, and bishop b7, b5, a takes b5, knight takes b5, queen d8. And in both cases the position is roughly equal. Instead of c takes b4, black could try bishop d7, but then after b takes c5, both b takes c5 and d takes c5 only lead to a balanced situation. So this is what white should have gone into, but instead of b4, he played knight c2, which is far too passive. And now black once again had the chance to play d5, but he chose to play bishop b7 instead, preparing the move further. And it has to be said that this isn't bad for him either. Knight h2. White desperately prepares to play on the king side, but this should not get anywhere. d5. Black finally seizes the centre. Knight g4. Knight takes g4. H takes g4. White hopes to gain play down the h-file. d4. Black correctly gains space. We now have a sort of Old Indian with colours reversed, in a favourable situation for the anti-Old Indian side. Now white has to retreat his bishop, bishop d2, and black continued bishop c8, regrouping the bishop to the superior e6 square. Indeed, this indicates why the immediate d5 rather than bishop b7 followed by d5 might have been even better, because e6 is a better square for the bishop than b7 in these situations. White continued bishop e2, and now black could have simply played bishop e6, but he chose to play g5 instead to prevent, or at least impede, white's further advances on the king side, although this is a little double-edged as it creates some at least potential weaknesses there. Play went c takes d4, e takes d4, b4. White hopes to create play on the queen side. Queen e7, b takes c5, b takes c5. Now, in this position, perhaps white's objectively best move would be knight a3, although after rook b8, black does have a strong initiative on the queen side, and this looks very good for him. However, instead of knight a3, white chose f3, hoping to create some chances on the king side with king f2, rook h1, bishop takes g5. But this is rather over-ambitious and in the end simply weakens his dark squares. Now, up to this point, black had played very logically, but over the next few moves he ends up misplacing his pieces and giving white some chances to get back into the game. Now, here the simple rook b8, developing the initiative on the queen side, would be very strong, and white would be hard pressed to contest it, especially as black has the additional bonus of white's weakened dark squares on the king side. However, black instead played bishop e5, and after king f2, perhaps just admitting that the bishop is not particularly well placed on e5 would have been best, and the bishop should simply have gone back to g7, bishop g7. But instead, black played queen d6, threatening the obvious bishop g3 check, winning the exchange, but white can simply play rook h1. And now after bishop g3 check, king g1 would, I think, have been best, as it's important that the bishop on e2 has a retreat square on f1. There are situations, as we shall see in the game and in the analysis, where black can play c4, and after d takes c4, d3 would fork the minor pieces on c2 and e2. Now, this may not be immediately a problem because the bishop on d2 could move and the pawn would be pinned against the queen by the rook, but it's still a valuable possibility for white to have. However, white instead played king f1, thinking that under certain circumstances it might be useful to have the bishop on e2 protected, but on balance this is the worst square for the king. Now, black's best move now is probably f6, consolidating his position on the king side. Now the g5 pawn is very firmly defended, but instead he played king g6, which creates some potential difficulties for his monarch. Play went knight a3, and now bishop e6 seems most logical, connecting the rooks and preparing to develop the initiative on the queen side, but instead he played knight e5. And here white missed a chance to escape by force. Here rook h3 allows white to create sufficient counterplay on the king side. c4. Black should break in the centre. If he plays passively, then white's kingside attack will be very strong. Knight takes c4, knight takes c4, d takes c4, d3. Black now wins a piece, but after bishop e3, d takes e2 check, king takes e2, and for instance queen c7, black has won a piece for 2 pawns, but white has enough attack for a draw. Rook on d to h1, attacking h6. bishop h4, blocking the attack. And now white has a spectacular tactical possibility. Bishop takes g5. Now, bishop takes g5 is a mistake because of rook takes h6 check, and bishop takes h6 is met by queen takes h6 mate, and king g7 by queen takes g5 check, king f8, rook h8 mate. So instead of bishop takes g5, black has to play h takes g5. And then white should continue rook takes h4, g takes h4, rook takes h4. And if black tries to escape with king f6, which is his most sensible defence, then after rook h6 check, he has to put the king on e7 because king g7, queen g5 check, king f8, rook h8 is mate. And now after king e7, queen g5 check, he cannot play king f8 because of rook h8 mate, and so he has to play king d7 when there is a perpetual check after queen d2 check, king e7, queen g5 check. So that's what white should have gone for, and was in a sense a logical continuation of his play, but it's not easy to see. In particular, the move bishop takes g5 requires some calculation. Otherwise it just looks like black has won a piece for not a lot. Anyway, instead of rook h3, white played the passive bishop e1. Play went bishop f4, queen c2, bishop e6, g3, bishop e3, king g2. White is starting to unravel his position, and now black should just seize the b file with rook on a to b8. But instead he plays the less logical rook on a to c8. Black really should have a rook on the b file, and if he wants to put a rook on c8, supporting the advantage of the c pawn, he should put the rook on e8 there. Now, white should swap the dark square bishops with bishop d2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, when he actually seems to be doing reasonably well. He's more or less unravelled his position and is well placed to contest the b file. This should be fine for him. But instead of this, he went off on an ill-advised adventure on the queen side with queen a4. And now black should have taken the opportunity to play c4, intending after knight takes c4 not to play knight takes c4, d takes c4 when white is fine, but bishop takes c4, d takes c4, king h7, when black's passed d-pawn and better placed pieces give him an obvious advantage. However, instead of c4, black played bishop d7, which gave white the opportunity to correct his mistake and pull back with queen c2, although after king g7, black's position is still preferable, but not as good as it would have been should he have played c4. However, white ploughed on with queen a5, and after rook b8, black was now winning. He obviously dominated the position, and his only problem was that he was running short of time. The following was played in extreme time pressure for both players. Play went bishop f2, rook b2. Black penetrates the white position with this and his following moves. Bishop takes e3, d takes e3, queen e1, bishop a4, rook b1, rook on e to b8. Black secures his control of the b file. King h3, rook on 8 to b4, and now white decided to make a desperate attempt to create some play on the king side, although this shouldn't objectively work. f4, g takes f4, g takes f4, knight takes d3, f5 check. Now here king h7 would have been black's simplest move when he's completely winning. Instead he played king g7, overlooking white's reply queen c3 check. Now because of this, king g7 just looks like a blunder, although in fact black is still winning, but it's much less straightforward than if he had played king h7. Here black's winning move is rook d4. The surprising point is that after bishop takes d3, apparently just winning a piece, rook f2, and after rook on b to f1 to contest the rook, king h7, the bishop on d3 is in a great deal of trouble. So, for instance, knight c4 is met by queen f4, bishop c4 is met by rook takes c4, and bishop b1 by rook d1, in all cases with a completely winning position for black. However, as black had simply not seen that queen c3 check was possible, and also because he was very short of time here, both players were just playing on the increment at this point, he just thought that he had blundered, and rather than rook to d4 he played queen d4. White continued with queen takes d3, obviously picking up the piece, rook takes b1, rook takes b1, and now this is where black had the opportunity to save the draw, or at least keep the position playable from his perspective with queen takes d3. And now white's best move is the surprising intermezzo f6 check. The point is that if he just plays bishop takes d3, black can play rook takes b1, and now as bishop takes b1 is just met by e2 and the pawn queens, white has to play knight takes b1, but then black has the tactical shot bishop c2. Now this would also occur if white had thrown in f6 check, but as we shall see, that leads to a superior version of these positions for white. Here, again, bishop takes c2, fails to e2 when the pawn queens, so white has to play bishop takes a6, but then black regains the piece with bishop takes b1, and this position is probably slightly preferable for black, but it really should be drawn. So if we go back to bishop takes d3, this is why instead of bishop takes d3, white should throw in f6 check. Now king takes f6 would be a mistake because of rook f1 check, king e5, bishop takes d3, and well, white's piece ought to be stronger than black's pawns. And note that this sequence means that the bishop c2 shot no longer comes into play. So instead of king takes f6, black should play king f8, and then play will go bishop takes d3, rook takes b1, again, bishop takes b1 is met by e2, so white has to play knight takes b1, and again black plays bishop c2 with the idea that bishop takes c2 is met by e2, so white again has to play bishop takes a6, and after bishop takes b1, it's a similar position to the one we had before, but black's king is much more passive here. So after, say, a4, bishop takes e4, king g3, this is probably slightly better for white. But yet again, it probably should be a draw with best play. Anyway, rather than queen takes d3, black played rook takes b1. But after queen takes b1, his position here is just hopeless. And indeed, he actually lost on time here, as he wasn't able to find a sensible continuation.